On behalf of Aviation-Event, I would like to warmly welcome you to this Aviation-Event 2023 Cluj. Of course, it's co-organized with Cluj Airport. I will save the many thanks for later to David Ciceo and his team. And I think we can start right away. As you know, this is the second consecutive year that the Aviation-Event is being conducted here in Cluj, this wonderful city of Cluj. And I think we can start right away. Obviously, you have seen in the agenda the name of Mr. Emil Boc, the mayor of Cluj-Napoca city. Mr. Emil Boc is not in the city. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it to be here, but there is a video message, so please, we can project it right away. We cannot, I'm afraid, this.
Dear Director David Ciceo, distinguished guests, dear conference participants. First of all, I would like to wish you very welcome in the very heart of Transylvania, Romania, Cluj-Napoca. In the last 25 years, Cluj International Airport has made continuous efforts to increase the connectivity of the city of Cluj-Napoca and of this region. The substantial growth of the air traffic at Cluj International Airport has certainly consolidated the city of Cluj-Napoca's position as an economic, social, academic, medical, sports and cultural artistic development pole in Romania. As a part of the digitalization process, Cluj International Airport has managed to successfully overcome challenges related to the appropriate IT infrastructure, focusing on improving operations and innovation while enhancing passenger experience. This process is aligned with the city digital transformation strategy. Today is an important day for our community as Cluj International Airport Avram Iancu becomes the airport aviation capital again while organizing a new edition of the prestigious Aviation-Event conference after the success of the pilot edition. I would like to congratulate Mr. General Manager David Ciceo and his entire team for organizing this international conference here in Cluj-Napoca. I am confident this event will further enhance the development of Cluj-Napoca and of our entire country. I wish you good luck in the debates of this prestigious conference, and I'm looking forward to see the results and count on us as a city to be involved and to support your activities. Thank you, and I wish you good luck again.
And we are, of course, deeply honored and humbled by the presence of Mr. Razvan Ciortea, the Deputy Governor of Cluj County. Your Excellency, I would like to invite you to the podium for your opening welcome speech. And I know that you speak a little bit of Greek, so thank you. Ευχαριστώ.
Stimate gazde, domnule director general David Ciceo, distinși oaspeți din țară și străinătate, onorată asistență. Sunt mândru și fericit că mă aflu astăzi împreună cu dumneavoastră la această conferință internațională de mare anvergură, organizată la Cluj, în inima Transilvaniei. Nu se aude.
Un, doi? Se aude? Okay. Dear hosts, Director David Ciceo, distinguished guests from Romania and abroad, honorable audience, I'm extremely proud and happy to be here today at this high-scale international conference organized in Cluj, in the very heart of Transylvania.
Aeroportul Internațional Cluj a devenit un important motor economic al regiunii, facilitând dezvoltarea comerțului, atragerea investițiilor străine în regiune, asigurând un impact economic direct și indirect prin intermediul locurilor de muncă create în domeniul aeroportuar și domeniile conexe acestuia.
The Cluj International Airport has become an important economic driver for the region, contributing to the development of trade, attracting foreign investors to the region, and delivering an important direct and indirect economic impact through the jobs it created in the aviation industry and related areas.
Practic, dezvoltarea aeroportului înseamnă dezvoltarea regiunii pe care o deservește și, din acest motiv, viziunea strategică pe termen lung pentru dezvoltarea infrastructurii facilităților existente s-a dovedit a fi un mare succes pentru Aeroportul Internațional Cluj.
Practically, the development of the airport brings growth to the region it serves, and so the long-term strategic vision for the development of the existing infrastructure and services has proven to be a success for the Cluj International Airport.
Abordarea dinamică a conducerii acestuia față de modernizarea și dezvoltarea infrastructurii aeroportoare în ultimii 25 de ani a condus la atingerea unui prag istoric de 2,9 milioane de pasageri în 2019, iar pentru anul 2023 se estimează noi recorduri de pasageri. Fapt care nu poate decât să ne bucure și să asigure în continuare aeroportului recunoașterea națională și internațională drept model de bune practici și un aeroport de referință în Europa de Sud-Est.
The airport management has had a dynamic approach to the modernization and development of the airport infrastructure over the past 25 years, which has led to a record high in passenger traffic, namely 2.9 million passengers in 2019. 2023 is expected to bring new passenger traffic records, which can only make us happy. That will also ensure that the airport will continue to gain national and international recognition as a best practice model, and it will continue to be recognized as a landmark airport in southeastern Europe.
Vreau să felicit întreaga echipă managerială a Aeroportului Internațional Cluj, condusă de domnul director general David Ciceo, care demonstrează continuu de peste 20 de ani că imposibilul devine posibil. În ceea ce privește realizările și eforturile constante pentru dezvoltarea și modernizarea aeroportului, prin implementarea multor proiecte și investiții de succes, benefice pentru întreaga comunitate clujană, dar și pentru pasagerii din area de acoperire.
I would like to congratulate the management team of the Cluj International Airport, which is led by its director, David Ciceo, who has constantly proved over the past 20 years that nothing is impossible and anything can be done. As far as achievements go and as far as the endeavors put in to develop and modernize the airport, through the implementation of multiple projects and by making successful investments, which are beneficial to the entire Cluj community as well as to the passengers in the catchment area of the airport.
Am convingerea că evenimentul care reunește astăzi aici profesioniști din aviației civile de la nivel internațional, reprezentanții ai autorităților naționale relevante și directori de companii aeriene și aeroporturi din Europa și România, va fi de un real succes pentru Cluj, pentru întreaga regiune și implicit pentru România.
I believe that the event gathering here today, worldwide professionals from the civil aviation industry, representatives of relevant national authorities and airline and airport managers from Europe and Romania will be a real success for Cluj, for the entire region, and also for Romania.
Știu că aici la Cluj se poate și vom oferi tot sprijinul la nivelul Ministerului și al Guvernului pentru implementarea numeroaselor proiecte aflate deja în derulare, proiecte care răspund nevoilor pasagerilor aeroportului clujan.
I know that the ministry and the government can and will lend all their support here in Cluj for the implementation of numerous already ongoing projects that meet the needs of the passengers that travel through the Cluj airport.
Trebuie să observăm, domnule director, cu siguranță că doar continuitatea poate garanta succesul și vă felicit și vă doresc cât mai mulți ani alături de noi la conducerea acestui aeroport. Avem nevoie de dumneavoastră. Vă mulțumesc și urez succes deplin lucrărilor conferinței, iar oaspeților ședere plăcută în capitala Transilvaniei. Vă mulțumesc tare mult!
By working together, we can make sure that we reach more successes in the future. I would like to thank you and to wish you a very successful conference and to wish to our guests a pleasant stay in Cluj, in the heart of Transylvania.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now it's time for our first moderated keynote. I will call on stage two gentlemen that need no introductions whatsoever. Mr. Marcel Riwalski, CEO, Aviation-Event, and Mr. Olivier Jankovic, Director General for ACI Europe. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. Good morning.
Good morning. Do you have a microphone? One more microphone, please. I use this short interruption. Yeah, Olivier, I have been told you're sitting on the blue. I have to sit on the yellow one. How are you? How was your traveling to Cluj?
Very happy because I'm in Cluj with all the
Okay.
aviation professionals and the community.
Okay.
So it's great to be here.
Okay. And how is Brussels doing these times? Olivier comes from Brussels. Yeah.
Brussels in terms of the political
Yeah.
environment.
In terms of Olivier Jankovic terms, what is happening there?
Well, it's busy as ever.
Okay.
Because as you know now today, about 90% of the regulations that impact airports in Europe are decided in Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big part of our work as ACI Europe, to interact with all the decision makers, all the people involved in the legislative process. I say hello to Marin Jean Marinescu, who's a member of the European Parliament, of the Transport Committee, who's a very reliable partner in trying to shape aviation policy in Europe. And we have a lot of work because there's a lot of legislation coming up, especially to decarbonize the air transport sector. And that presents really unprecedented challenges in terms of how it's going to impact the economy of aviation and its long-term prospect.
Ladies and gentlemen, now the official title is Olivier Jankovic, Director General of ACI Europe, right? Can you explain for those, also some journalists here, who have never heard about ACI maybe, what is ACI doing and especially what is ACI Europe doing? Okay. Just in a few phrases to explain what we are all doing together and why airports like Cluj and TVCluj are members of this association, and who else is member?
Yes, sure. ACI is the global trade association for the airport industry. So on the airline side, you have IATA. On the airport side, you have ACI. We are organized differently from IATA because we are a confederation of regional associations with a coordination office in Montreal, which deals with ICAO. So as ACI Europe, we have responsibility for about 55 countries. So that means we have a pan-European dimension. We're based in Brussels, very much focused on the EU, but we have a much larger footprint extending to Russia, Turkey, the STAN countries, Georgia, Armenia, and Israel. And our role is really to represent and serve the airport industry. The lobbying part, the advocacy part is very important. I've mentioned that already. The other side of our role is to act as a center of expertise for airports and connects airports together. So we have a structure of committees and forum where we have about, on an ongoing basis, 500 experts from the membership, from the wider membership coming together and basically shaping our policies, our positions, but also benchmarking, making sure we have the right data to provide to the members. And we try to set standards and run some certification programs also for the industry to keep progressing airport management. And Cluj is a very active and supportive member of ACI, along with, of course, most of the other Romanian airports. And David Ciceu is part of the board of ACI Europe.
Talking about numbers, how many airports we could imagine being members of ACI Europe? Is there a specific number you can give us?
We have 563 airports in our footprint, which account for 95% of commercial air traffic in Europe.
Okay.
And members really of all sizes, from the very big hubs, you know, the Heathrows and Charles de Gaulle and Frankfurt, down to very, very small airports.
Okay.
So we really present the entire European airport community, and that's why we like to call ourselves the voice of Europe's airports.
Great. You just mentioned in your description of your, let's say, territory, you just mentioned Russia. Is Russia still a member, or are you still working with Russian airports?
Russia is a difficult situation for us.
Russia itself will never be a member, but Russian airports.
No, Russian airports have been long-time members and supporters of the association. Of course, with what is happening now with the war, we had to comply with the sanctions.
Exactly.
So we had to review our membership terms for Russian airports based on the impact of the sanctions, and that led us to suspend services or membership for a lot of Russian airports, except actually one, Moscow Domodedovo, who's still a fully fledged member of ACI Europe.
How about the second, let's say, doubtful country, which is Belarus? Same?
It's the same situation.
Same situation. Okay, good. Coming now to the industry. And by the way, if anybody wants to add some questions here, I'm looking at my friend Andrew. Please keep them for the end or interrupt us in a certain way. We are ready to interact here at almost any moment. Aviation 2023, we are already end of March, okay, but still the year is still ahead of us, and industry and economy has become more short-term reacting than before COVID. I think we can agree on that, and that doesn't depend on aviation, right? So what is the main challenges as far as you can foresee it today for 23, and especially, let's say, for the summer, because most of us will use as consumers, as customers, aviation in summer, independently from our aviation functions here. Will it work? Will it be the same thing as last year? And how is the demand over the European markets?
Well, 2023 is off to a very good start at the moment. I think the immediate short-term challenge for airports in Europe, especially the bigger airports, is operational resilience through the summer. So their ability to cope with the strong demand, because we expect a very strong and dynamic summer. We all know last year was a bit difficult in terms of adapting to the certain surge in traffic.
May I interrupt you and ask who was difficult, or can you
well,
talk about that?
I think it depends on the markets, but what you can see, and I think it's interesting to know that, is that those airports that had the most difficulties operationally were airports where labor markets were very tight, in particular the Netherlands with Schiphol. Schiphol had a lot of difficulties in finding people to do security screening, but also ground handlers were having problems to recruit. And I think it's also a problem for airports that generally didn't get a lot of financial support from states throughout the pandemic, because that weakened them financially, and this weaker financial position, I think, impacting them in their ability to rebuild and prepare for the recovery. But this year, I think, this year is different because, of course, the increase of traffic compared to last summer is going to be much less than the increase of traffic last year compared to the preceding summer. And also because airports are getting more prepared. What we get from the membership at large is that they've all stepped up preparedness plans. So starting to plan for the summer in terms of looking at what resources they need much earlier than before, and doing that in a much more cooperative way also across all partners in the ecosystem. Because there's been a lot of focus on the operational difficulties at airports, but actually, I think in all honesty, all partners in the aviation ecosystem were bracing for the same kind of difficulties. You know, airlines were having difficulties recruiting, getting their staff back, getting their aircraft back. There was possibly some, you know, too optimistic planning in terms of what they thought they could operate. So I think the effort this year is really on trying to align all the partners operationally, and there Eurocontrol is playing a very important role through the network manager. And I think we're in a pretty good shape for this summer. You know, you might still have problems at some locations, but by and large, I think the network will be much more resilient than last year.
Okay, but again, as we are all, well, most of us will be consumers, passengers this summer, where would be concretely, if you know, if you want to give us, the bottlenecks in kind of which airports will cause the most problems this summer, if so?
Well,
or which routes or which destinations, whatever.
I think Schiphol is still bracing with a difficult situation, but they're working very hard on it, and the situation has improved, and possibly Frankfurt as well. But I think by and large they will be better than last year.
Okay, great. Let's come to some other topics. As we said several times, we are here guests of Cluj Airport, Cluj-Napoca and David Ciceo. So let's talk about Eastern Europe, or let's say, as people here say, Central Europe. Yeah? What is the specific situation independently from summer 2023? Is there a much larger growth to expect it in these, let's say, catchment areas than in our, let's say, more or less satirized Western European countries? I think so. What is the background and how fast it will come? Josef Faradi will be here today. He made his catchment area is Central Europe, isn't it? Yeah. So what's going on there on at these airports?
Well, I think the eastern part of the EU is no doubt a very dynamic market in terms of growth. And that's because you have structural factors that still benefit the region. The first one is that the propensity to fly is still low compared to Western Europe. So it's a market which in aviation terms is less mature than the Western European market. And also it's a market where you have less alternatives in terms of road transport and rail, which of course is favorable to aviation. So I think these are the two big advantages that the Eastern EU market has over the Western EU market, and why most probably in the years to come, the growth rate is likely to be more dynamic than in Western or the core of Europe. Having said that, at the moment, if you look at the recovery of traffic across Europe, it has become very fragmented and patchy. And of course, you have the impact of the war in Ukraine, which has been impacting some market in Eastern Europe as well.
Which one's the most? I mean,
well, I think
besides Ukraine itself?
Latvia, for example. There's the fact that low-cost carriers are very selective in selecting where they are going to grow. So some markets have missed out a bit the opportunities presented by low-cost carriers. Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia. Others have benefited more. Romania has been performing very well. If you look at, we have consolidated data for January. I think Romania is plus 3% compared to where they were pre-pandemic, which means they have exceeded actually their pre-pandemic levels in terms of traffic. And last year, I think it was the second or the first most dynamic market in the eastern part of Europe. I mean, they closed last year at minus 10% in passenger volume compared to pre-pandemic, which means they significantly outperformed the European average, which was minus 21%.
And talking about Central Europe means, maybe with some exceptions, talking about mid-sized airports, right? That's the dominating airport size right here. And how about interconnectivity in these, let's say, not so large airports? Is that still working? Is that a factor here, or Central Europe is going more point to point? What's your feeling here?
Generally, you've seen that the patterns of the recovery from pandemic have benefited much more smaller and regional airports than larger airports. And that's because actually a lot of the recovery has been and continues to be driven by leisure and VFR traffic. Business traffic is still very much down compared to pre-pandemic level. And I think it's going to stay structurally down because there's a lot of pressure on corporates to reduce travel, in particular because of climate reasons. The second thing is that we all know that a lot of external markets, long-haul markets, have remained closed for a long time, whereas the domestic and the intra-European market were the first to reopen. So that means airlines were very much focused on the intra-European market, and therefore that benefited a lot of smaller and regional airports. Mm-hmm. And if you look still in January, you compare what we call the majors, our 5 biggest hubs in Europe, compared to the performance of let's say, airports with less than 10 million passengers, so mostly regional and smaller airports. the performance is simple to double. I mean, the larger hubs were still minus 10% compared to pre-pandemic levels, whereas the airports less than 10 million passengers were at minus 5%. So they've been recovering faster, and I think that's of course the reality we see here in Eastern Europe.
And talking again Central Europe, is there...
Just maybe on connectivity, I think what is clear is that for this part of Europe, the low-cost carriers are driving the market. I mean, they're driving growth generally across Europe now. If you look for this summer, for example, you look at airline capacity for this summer in terms of seats, you can see that the major network European airlines will still be down in terms of seat capacity compared to where they were in the summer of 2019, whereas the ultra-low-cost carriers will be considerably more, offering more seats. I mean, I was discussing yesterday with Joseph Barasdi, he was telling me Wizz Air will be putting 70% more seats this year than last year or pre-pandemic. So, you know, the growth opportunities are coming from low-cost carriers, and that's even more true, of course, for that part of Europe, because in that part of Europe, you don't have strong network carriers.
Low-cost carriers, low-cost airports, is that something? We never hear about low-cost airports. Is it existing or is it impossible? Because airports costs are pretty much the same everywhere, given the regulations. Or is it something we should consider in the future?
Well, I think
I'm looking here at the audience. There's some people here.
All airports are low cost in terms of, you know, being very careful about their cost structure and making sure they remain competitive to attract and retain traffic.
I mean, Heathrow, Frankfurt, and Charleroi will never be low cost. That's clear, probably, yeah?
Yeah, but they serve a very wide portfolio of airlines with very different needs. So, you know, when you have Emirates, you have to provide a certain level of service and facilities to make sure that airlines operates from your airport. Of course, you know, if your Cluj airports having Emirates is, you know, a bit a distant prospect, possibly for now. So, you know, you have to be realistic with the kind of airlines you're going to attract and make sure that not just your price offering, but actually the facilities you're offering are fit for the operating model of those airlines.
Operating model, again, I heard of one airport new airport opening in Romania even in June. The same happens, I think, around this summer in Poland. Are there new airports upcoming, really new airports on the network in Eastern Europe, or is the number of airports more or less achieving a saturized level? Some situation.
I think it's going to be pretty stable. I don't think you will see a lot of new airport infrastructure being developed generally in Europe. First, because it's becoming much more difficult to develop airport infrastructure because of the sustainability agenda, clearly. But also because I think we have a pretty dense network of airports in Europe, in my view. So, you know, there might be some needs here and there, but that's going to be very marginal.
Okay. Talking about going a bit even more east, which is then Ukraine, independently from the daily news on what's happening there and what Russia is doing there, most of the, let's say, air infrastructure, at least for civil aviation, is damaged or even totally destroyed. I myself was in Kherson airport. That's like, you can't imagine that ever again there would be a commercial flight at the moment, to be honest, yeah? So what is European Union and European airports and ACI Europe doing for getting these people one day or the other back to the network, back to connectivity, and back to making money, obviously, also, because Ukraine was a very large, very much growing market until 24th of Feb 2022, right?
Yeah. Where we're in constant contact with our Ukrainian members, of course, and from the very start we looked at what we could do as ACI Europe to support them. So we initiated a donation campaign from Europe's airports through Airlink, which is a fantastic NGO which provides support in logistical and transport terms to other NGOs that go to conflict areas. And our campaign was actually their second most successful campaign. And I'd like to thank all the European airports who participated because that was really important. We, of course, give a platform to Ukrainian airports at all our events, and we've also facilitated the transfer of equipment from other airports in Europe for free to Ukrainian airports. Some airports have made significant donations, like Munich, like Groupe ADP or Budapest. And now what we're discussing really is how we can facilitate and help the restart. So, for example, Eurocontrol has put in place a recovery plan from Ukrainian aviation, which is very much focused on the capabilities of the air navigation service provider. And we're discussing with Eurocontrol the fact that it's all good to, of course, look at the air navigation service provider, but you also need to look at the airport and make sure that the airports are part of the scenarios that are being developed to look at how air traffic could restart to Ukraine. The EU has channeled quite a lot of financing to Ukraine to support transport infrastructure in general. Where we are a bit disappointed is that so far the Ukrainian government has not chosen to channel some of that financing to the airports in Ukraine. And obviously the Ukrainian airports at the moment are bracing with, repairing the damage they've got. And that has not impacted all airports generally across the country. Some airports are very damaged, but some airports actually have their infrastructure almost intact. The difficulty for them is that, of course, they are striving to maintain operational capabilities. So making sure the equipment, the facilities remain up to being operational. And that means a lot, making sure they keep the staff and they keep paying the staff. And that leads to, of course, a problem of financial viability, because I think what we hear is that the money will be here until the summer, but past summer there won't be any more money to keep the staff, and then you compromise the ability of those airports to restart. So yes, we're discussing at the moment with the European Commission, but also Eurocontrol as to what can be done to make sure that we can preserve those operational capabilities in terms of making sure there is some financing going to the Ukrainian airports.
And just to close that topic, I'm frankly saying that some guessing. Let's assume the Russian hostilities would stop one day or the other, and civil aviation would come back, and a certain other would come theoretically back. How long will it take to get at least 80% of the Ukrainian infrastructure back in service? Let's say from the airport side. Let's leave all the other stuff out. What is your guess? I mean, we have never seen in Europe something like this. I know, that's why I'm guessing.
I think I can't give an answer to that because I'm not sure also it's something that the Ukrainians would want to go public about. But the picture is obviously very varied depending on the airport.
Yeah, okay. Joanna, are we okay? Do we have questions?
We can take questions now. Thank you very much for this
Yes.
very interesting discussion. If you can look at your folders, you can pose your questions through a QR code. You can download the QR code, and through your mobile phones, you can pose your questions. And we have here a very clever iPad that will give us the name, your name, and the question as well. Okay, so we are looking forward to receiving your questions. I have my colleague here who is assisting as well.
Then I will just cover
that. If not, if we don't want to delay the process, then probably we can have a microphone.
I have one more question which we can discuss while you are collecting possible reactions from the audience. Future of airports. How does the airport look in 30 years? Don't tell me you don't know. You have at least a guess.
No, I think it's true that COVID and the current situation is forcing airport to have a more shorter planning horizons. However, I think it's very important for airports to look at the long term, and I think that's what they're trying to do. What we see, and I think what is remarkable, is that we see Europe's airports still prioritizing decarbonization, notwithstanding the difficulties they've gone through. If we look at our airport carbon accreditation program, we're now having 260 European airports certified for carbon management, reducing their CO2 emissions. And I think that's really the biggest priority if you look at the long term, because we are getting new policies and regulation from the EU level, in particular with Fit for 55, which will require basically the entire aviation sector to reduce its CO2 emission at quite a rapid pace. And that will require significant investment. So for airports, it's in particular about looking at how you reduce your own carbon emission, those that are under your own control, the so-called Scope 1 and 2 emissions, which by and large a lot of airports are doing now at the moment. But also crucially now what you can do to reduce the so-called Scope 3 emissions, so in particular the emissions coming from aircraft. And there it's about how airports can be prepared to facilitate the supply and the use of sustainable aviation fuels by airlines. Because we have European regulation that will come into force from 2025 that will mandate the use of those fuels progressively by airlines up to 63% by 2050. And beyond sustainable aviation fuels, it's how airports can make sure that they can provide green electricity and green hydrogen to airlines at a medium-term horizon. And that is a very important question because that will require significant modification to their infrastructure and significant investment. So we just did a study to look at scenarios there, and what we see is that potentially if you take the top 300 airports in Europe, you will need about 17 billion euro of investment to facilitate the supply, the storage, and the provision of green hydrogen at those airports, and that's only for intra-European flights. So I think looking at the long term, the decarbonization is unavoidable, and it's actually it's existential. If European aviation and airports don't embrace and work now on decarbonization, I think our societal relevance will be questioned, and we risk seeing demand management and the degrowth of aviation.
Mm-hmm. But again, maybe a number. Look at the so-called David Siseo Airport, Cluj International Airport. What would be an estimation for an investment David has to do to get exactly at that level? I'm not even giving a date, just you're talking about hydrogen here and there, but what amount, at least in a gas?
Well, I think the amounts will be very different depending on the size of the airport, because initially, of course, you know, if the needs for green hydrogen are lower for smaller airports, initially the supply will come from trucks. You still need to build the storage facilities.
Exactly.
There's the question whether you need to build liquefaction facilities or the liquefaction will be done off airport. But these are still things that we are trying to understand and plan for at the moment. As ACI Europe, we are part of this industrial alliance called the Alliance for Zero Emission Aircraft, which was kickstarted by the European Commission. And we bring together all the companies and all the sectors involved in planning for this transition. So I can't give you an answer now, but what I can tell you is that Cluj is working already now to reduce its Scope 1 and 2 emissions. So those emissions under its control, they are certified under airport carbon accreditation, and so are the two Bucharest airports. So the airports are starting to work on this now.
Great.
We have one question.
Super.
What is last updates on Project Next, and is there any collaboration with IATA 1ID? What is last update on Project Next, NEXTT? And is there any collaboration with IATA 1ID? Will we see connected information systems in near future in airports?
Maybe we can explain first what NEXT means for
what
those
NEXT is.
who
Yeah.
I think the NEXT is the project managed by ACI World together with IATA for the next generation facilities for airports. I'm not updated honestly on this at the moment, so you're catching me by surprise. But I think there's a lot happening between ACI and IATA more generally on trying to connect the dots and more closely together. I think, you know, when you look at the key three strategic directions that airports have to follow for the future, it's about sustainability, it's about innovation, and it's about diversification. So innovation is core to the future of the airport business, and digitalization, artificial intelligence are all part of this. And this is something we are looking to support as well as ACI.
Thank you, Olivier. There is no other question here, but I know that there was one of our guests that was trying to pose the question. So I think that they cannot use
we are good then. We have still some time, as we can see here. I would like to close again, let's say, maybe controversial topic.
There is one more. Sorry,
there is
one more. There are two more. Okay, now the situation is starting to heating up. Airlines market is consolidated more and more. What about airports?
Yeah, that comes to the question of opening and closing airports. Maybe we had before.
Yes, I think I mean, consolidation on the side of the airlines is going to be possibly an unavoidable reality. It's been slower, actually, than what we had thought, because actually, if you look through the pandemic, you know, there was a lot of question as to whether the pandemic would accelerate consolidation, and it has not really been the case. The consolidation on the European side has been much slower than what we've seen in the US. And it has actually happened more by attrition than by mergers, although we can see now that the dynamic is restarting. You have IAG trying to snap Air Europa. You have Lufthansa now snapping ITA Airways. So we're getting there. I think for us the issue is that, of course, with consolidation, you further affect the balance of the existing airport-airline relationship, in the sense that it's clear today that airports in Europe are competing on a pan-European basis to attract and retain traffic. So the less airlines you have, you know, the more you're exposed to a lot of pressure from these airlines to dictate the rules for using the airport. And clearly what this will mean is that the competitive pressures upon airports vis-à-vis airlines will only get bigger. I mean, today you have 600, 700 airports in Europe offering commercial services, I mean, open for commercial operations, but you have essentially 10 major airport groups of major airlines shaping the market. So that means that you have 700 airports, you know, going after all the same airlines to try to get them to serve their destination.
And there is one more question. I will try to decipher this one. 300 airport equals to 70 billion euro. 300 airport equals to 70 billion euro for a green fuel VS. How much on the classic ones? Is this sustainable? Does the European Union has an unlimited budget?
Sorry,
Does UE, which, okay, so I will start again. 300 airport equals to 70 billion euro for a green fuel VS. How much on the classic ones? Is this sustainable? Does UE, which practically means European Union, I suppose, has an unlimited budget?
Yeah, we can't hear it.
Okay,
it's not working
so the
here.
question is,
Michael Gavins, maybe I could add one question, because you just elaborated a bit of the future of airport operations, and we have just been forced with some dramatic operational problems at European airports. And in my view, is there not a really strong demand for digitization and automatization at airports? And I just give you a brief example. If you look at the method, how we organized loading and unloading of narrow-body aircraft, this process hadn't changed for the last 60 years. And so, therefore, my brief question is whether we really would need a complete new program for innovation of all these operational processes, because you also have to keep in mind the demographic factor. So if we just look at the situation in Germany, within the next 15 years, we are going to lose about 1/3 of the overall workforce in Germany.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for your question. I think it's a very relevant point. I think it's frustrating to see how we haven't made progress in automating some of the key airport process, and baggage handling is surely one you would think today that, you know, with the technology we have, we could do a much better job. I think it comes down to the ability, in particular, of ground handling to invest, because we know ground handling is under a lot of pressure, competitive pressure. The market has been liberalized, and actually, when you look at the policy and regulatory framework, you could say that actually we put a bit too much emphasis on liberalizing the market and making sure the prices to the users, to the airlines, are the lowest possible. But I think what the last summer proved is that that has been at the expense of quality and resilience. And I think there's a more general issue about strategically how we look at ensuring resilience in operations at airports and integrity in operations. And what does it mean in terms of how we finance airports? Because, of course, we've all came to realize last year that resilience has some cost. So I think the difficulty we have is to bring all the partners together, and especially the weakest partners like the ground handlers, to dedicate time and money to look at innovation. And I think what we're seeing is that more and more, especially larger airports, want actually now to step into that role, which I think is very positive. And the fact that we as ACI Europe, we're establishing, we have the first meeting next Monday, we're establishing a new innovation forum for our members, where we'll bring together all the innovation labs of our major airports to share and drive the innovation agenda, and we're going to set the priorities, but surely automation for ground processes will be part of this agenda, because this is definitely something we need to look at. I think if you look forward, I think the main constraints we will face for aviation and airports will come on the supply chain, on the supply side, and labor will be a key determinant, and the way to address that challenge is, of course, automation and innovation.
Thank you all for contribution. We close this panel here right away. I know that Rüdiger Kianikas and Josef Varadi will talk later, so in preparation of that talk, our time is over, but you have only one answer. It was planned 3, but time is over. What would be the one and only wish, strong wish, you would have to the airline industry as airport representative for the summer?
To the airlines?
Yeah, to the airlines. Only airlines. Address here, please.
Well, I see Josef there.
Yeah, hear more people. Don't worry, yeah? Hear more people. Only one.
Well, cooperation.
Okay.
Let's keep cooperating and working together to drive sustainable air connectivity for Europe and affordable connectivity for Europe.
The wish is placed, the stage is closed. Thank you very much, Olivier.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now it's time for the visionary leader of Cluj Airport to come on stage, Mr. David Ciceo, CEO of Cluj International Airport since November 1995, transformed the airport in one of the busiest regional hubs in Romania. So we are expecting Mr. Ciceo to reveal his secrets for this success. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Welcome in Cluj, welcome in Romania. We are very happy to organize the second edition of Aviation-Event. We have participants here from more than 30 countries and from airports, airlines, handling all the actors who fulfill, who make possible the flights and passengers. I am very honored that here is also Mr. Marian Jean Marinescu, Europarlamenter. He is very involved in aviation at the European level. Also Mr. Olivier Jankovic, General Director ACI Europe, Mr. Jos Lemmers, CEO of Munich Airport, Mr. Josef Vorodi, CEO of Wizz Airport, and also all the other guests and colleagues. We really appreciate their effort. Regarding Romanian aviation, I would like a short to say about history. Romania has a long history regarding aviation. Traian Vuia in 1906 already managed to make a plane, one of the first flights with a machine heavier than air. It was near Paris. Also, Harry Coanda, it is worldwide recognized as the father of the first jet plane. Already in 1910, he managed to design a jet plane. Aurel Vlaicu in 1914 designed and built a model airplane entirely out of metal. We have a long history in Romania. Also, when I finish briefly, Mr. Buzenchi will speak about Smaranda Brăescu, a parachutist which was worldwide recognized for her accomplishments. Also, Romania, together with France, they established in Paris on 23rd of April 1920 a Franco-Romanian air transport company which delivered flights to Paris, Prague, Vienna, Warsaw, Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest, Istanbul. And this company, Franco-Romanian, was the ancestor of Air France and Tarom. Regarding airports, there is an article, and we looked in archives. In 1938, in Romania were 32 aerodromes. Of course, at that time, Romania was greater, including Chișinău, Cernăuți, but has also a long history. Regarding Cluj Airport, also Cluj Airport has a long history. 1917 was the first flight on this location. 1932, it was the official date for the civil airport. Until 96, the airport had only domestic flights. We managed to obtain the governmental decision to be international in 96. We started the process of modernization. 2007 was a very important year for Romanian aviation, for our airport, because Romania joined the European Union in 2007. So liberalization came. No longer bilateral agreements, and it was a big change for regional airports to attract foreigner airlines. For us, it is also important. In 2007 was the first Wizz Air flight, and at that time, together with Mr. Josef Vorodi, we signed for 5 planes to be based in Cluj. We appreciate his vision, his commitment. Now we have 7 planes based on our airport. In 2007, when we signed for 5 planes to be based in Cluj, we did not have enough apron, not enough infrastructure. But also this commitment and vision of Wizz Air and of Joseph motivated us, to improve and to develop our infrastructure. We managed to build new terminals. 2013, we managed to build a totally new runway. We had 2.9 million passengers in 2019, and this year we expect more than 3 million passengers. Regarding aviation in Romania, we have 17 airports. This summer also Brașov Airport will start. There is a big competition, but also we have a big potential. We have a very good catchment area and a lot of possibilities. Now we have more than 60 scheduled flights to more than 20 countries. Regarding Cluj, our city, it is the second city in Romania. We have a lot of foreigner companies here. In 2019, Cluj-Napoca was ranked third by Forbes Best. Cluj City managed to attract a lot of IT companies. Also, sometimes we say Silicon Valley of Europe. We were very successful with industrial parks, and the GDP per capita in Cluj increased and is higher than the rest of the country. We have very important universities here in Cluj. We have almost 100,000 students, a lot of foreigner students. It is one of the oldest university in Europe, and we assure all the specialties. We have Babeș-Bolyai University, Technical University, University of Agricultural Science, which are internationally recognized. Cluj, in the last years, managed to attract a lot of festivals. Untold Festival is one of the biggest in Europe, and we have a lot of foreigners who participate in these festivals. We have also in the county a lot of touristic destinations, and for this we have more and more foreigner passengers. Regarding the Romanian air transport market, before crisis in 2019, in Romania we had 23 million passengers. Population of Romania, it is around 21 million. I will show that we have great potential in future of growth. Of course, COVID affected us a lot. In 2020, we had only 7.2 million passengers, but it's relevant that half of this number, it was in the first 3 months, January, February, and March. We made a big effort for recovery. In 2022, we managed to have 21 million passengers, minus 9.5, less than 2019. Regarding traffic in Romania, we analyzed and we consider in 2040, we expect to have more than 50 million passengers. For this, we need a lot of investments. The airport, we need to double the infrastructure. We need everything. We need terminals, we need aprons, we need to invest in people, procedures. What is very good in the last 2 years, the regional airports received a lot of European funds. The Ministry of Transportation financed projects for infrastructure, for safety, for security. Only this year, the regional airports will invest around 500 million euro until 31st of December this year. In Cluj, we already invested a lot, and this year we will invest 80 million euro until 31st of December. We have to finish until 30, it is a condition imposed by European Union. We will extend the terminal, new aprons, new systems, firefighting buildings. This potential, it's a big challenge for Romania. Also, we consider it's real because still the proportion of passenger compared to population is still low in Romania compared with Western country and other European countries. Regarding airline capacity distribution in Romania in 2023, we made an estimation. We saw and we see it is a very dynamic changes regarding the structure airlines. Wizz Air will have this year more than 50% of entire Romanian market. In Cluj, Wizz Air, they have more than 65%, and we consider it was a big help for Romanian aviation because they managed to find new destinations, new base, and started flights in a lot of regional airports. We can see at Rome, they have 15% of the market, Ryanair 10%, Lufthansa 5.6%, and we want to work and to discuss in future with these airlines and other airlines in order to be part of future development to reach 50 million passengers in Romania. Regarding Cluj, we started with 30,000 as a domestic airport. We can see here also 2007, a very important year also for Cluj, because we managed to attract new airline to develop our traffic, and because we studied what happened in Poland, in Hungary, which joined European Union earlier in 2004. We started in 2005-2006 to develop our infrastructure, and in 2008-2009 we managed to finish terminals for 3 million passengers. The crisis affected a lot. This year we expect to have more than 3 million passengers. The aviation in Romania developed a lot. In '96, in Romania in total were only 2 million passengers. Bucharest in '96 had 1 million passengers. So increased a lot, and we consider it's very important for Romanian economy. Unfortunately, we do not have good infrastructure for railway, for highway. So that's why we consider it's more important aviation than other countries. In our estimation for Cluj, we consider in 2040 we will have 7 million passengers. For this, of course, we have to develop our infrastructure, to develop strategies for employees, competency plan for future procedures, and one of our main projects is to extend the runway. Now they started to reroute the river. The runway now is 2,100 meters. When they finish to reroute the river, we can extend to 3,400 meters, and this will create new possibilities for our airport. We invested and we continue the investments. We just finished a new taxiway. 50% was funded with European money. And we start this year, and we will finish to extend the apron for new parking places. we will extend the terminal, and the big project for the future, and we start design this year, it is a totally new terminal. It's very important, as we heard earlier, cooperation with all stakeholders in order to increase the traffic. That's why also this conference, we consider it is very good opportunity to discuss the challenges for our airports. What Mr. Oliver Jankovic said about decarbonization, also our airport committed to be carbon neutral, zero until 2050. We have a lot of investments, but of course we have to take care of sustainability. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ciceo. I think that we have to establish a direct connection between Cluj and Athens. We used to have it in the past, and having said that, I think I will call on stage the most appropriate person to discuss about development and growth. So our next key moderator, the second moderated keynote, first of all, let me invite the moderator, Mr. Rudiger Kiani-Kresch, since 1991, aviation-focused journalist and editor, and of course, a gentleman that needs no introduction whatsoever, and I think you forgot something. Okay. I was just about to say it to Mr. Ciceo.
I said about Mr. Buzenki, just 3 minutes. He will show a very interesting part of history of Mr. Buzenki, please. Romanian aviation, but also world aviation. Smaranda Brescu, I invite you to.
Stimați oaspeți, doamnelor și domnilor, sunt extrem de onorat pentru invitația primită din partea organizatorilor, domnului dr. inginer David Ciceo, de care ne leagă o lungă colaborare, materializată prin prezența unei expoziții permanente în ultimii 10 ani în incinta Aeroportului Internațional Avram Iancu Cluj, pe diferite teme care au fost vizionate după aprecierea noastră de peste 3,6 milioane de pasageri.
Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am extremely honored by the invitation I received from the organizers and from engineer David Ciceo, PhD, with whom we have been working for a long time. In the past 10 years, we set up together a permanent exhibition at the Avram Iancu Cluj International Airport, focusing on different topics, and according to our estimates, that exhibition has been visited already by over 3.6 million passengers.
Reprezint Asociația Română pentru Propaganda și Istoria Aeronauticii Smaranda Brescu Cluj, asociație națională înființată prin decret regal în ianuarie 1927. Scopul ei este de a promova aviația română și personalitățile ei.
I am here as a representative of the Cluj branch of the Smaranda Brăiescu Romanian Association for Aviation, Propaganda and History. The National Association was set up by royal decree in January 1927. Its mission is to promote the Romanian aviation and its personalities.
Smaranda Brescu s-a născut în 1897, pe 21 mai, și a fost înmormântată la Cluj pe 2 februarie 1948. Parașutistă brevetată în 1928, record mondial feminin de salt cu parașuta de la înălțimea de 6.000 de metri, realizat pe 2 octombrie 1931 în Câmpia Bărăganului, România, record mondial absolut de 7.233 de metri stabilit pe 19 mai 1932 la Sacramento, California. Pe 15 octombrie 1932 a obținut brevetul de pilot în Statele Unite. Pe 19 mai 1936 traversează Marea Mediterană de la Roma, Italia, la Tripoli, Libia, cu un avion monomotor, 1100 km în 6 ore și 15 minute. Condamnată la 2 ani închisoare pentru protestul împotriva falsificării alegerilor din 1946 din România. Se înalță la ceruri pe 2 februarie 1948 și este mormântată la Cluj-Napoca, unde asociația noastră i-a ridicat un monument.
Okay. Smaranda Brăiescu was born in 1897 and she died in 1948. She's buried in Cluj. She was a parachutist, a female parachutist who was licensed in 1928. She held the women's world record for the highest parachute jump. She jumped from 6,000 meters in 1931 in Romania, and she also held the absolute world record for the highest parachute jump, jumping from more than 7,000 meters in 1932 in Sacramento, California. And she also got her pilot license from the US in 1932, and she crossed the Mediterranean Sea from Rome to Tripoli, Libya, with a single-engine plane, crossing the sea in 6 hours and 15 minutes. She was sentenced to jail for protesting against the manipulation of the 1946 elections in Romania, and as I said, she's buried in Cluj.
Anul 2022 a fost anul Smaranda Brăiescu prin lege, votată de Parlamentul României. Mai multe informații despre ea v-am oferit fiecăruia dintre dumneavoastră această revistă aniversară. Vă mulțumesc foarte mult!
You can find more information about Smaranda Brăiescu in this anniversary magazine that you have in your folders. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the most interesting things in these conferences is the unexpected element, especially when it comes to a young lady, a pioneering lady. So thank you very much for this intervention. And now I think it's the time for our second moderated keynote. I'm not forgetting the discussion about development and growth and about the direct connection between Cluj and Athens. Okay, so now it's the time to call on stage the moderator, Mr. Rudi Herchiani-Kresh, a journalist since 1991, aviation-focused journalist and editor in Wirtschaftswoche. So please. And of course, a gentleman that needs no introductions whatsoever, Mr. Joseph Varadi, CEO Wizz Air. Gentlemen.
So, thanks for being here. We sat here a year ago in the very same circumstances. The only thing different was the way to get here. How did you get here in all this turmoil that we had in the last couple of days, at least from Germany?
Good morning, everyone. You need to repeat the question because the sounding is pretty bad.
I'm moving a bit closer. That's
okay,
probably
please,
better.
Please.
No, first of all, I mean, 2 sentences about Wizz Air. It's the fastest growing, most efficient and most regional diversified, and of course we talk about the 500 plan as well. How did you get here in all this turmoil that we had in the last couple of days with strikes? Was that a problem for you as a traveler to Cluj?
Well, you know, actually I was starting in the US last week. From there went to Canada. Then from Canada to Malta in order to get to Cluj yesterday. So I've been a little crazy. Actually, I don't know whether you guys are doing it, but my assistant is tracking my travel and reports me on the travel pattern. So I'm flying 61 hours a month, on average 18 flights in a month. So this is exactly the same as our pilots fly. But when they finish the job, they start complaining how exhausted they are. And when I finished it, I start actually working on the business. So I've been travel heavy.
Your airline has been on a remarkable rebound in the last couple of months, and the whole industry seems to be going up. Load factors, yield, even profits are beyond, at least 2019. The EU fares are up 19% average. How did that come across? Is it just the demand, or is there a miracle working?
Well, I mean, I would mention a few things. First of all, we are full swing back in business. Our load factors are now at 94-95% levels. We are growing pretty much everywhere where we operate. If I look at summer capacity is going to be 70% higher than pre-pandemic last summer. So I would say that actually we took strategic advantages of the COVID time. So COVID, in a way, in hindsight, was good to us. Now, not in a way of being immune. Of course, we were suffering from the COVID impacts, but we actually took a number of strategic gains from the period. We made significant investments in the UK, buying out a slot portfolio at Gatwick. We got into Italy full stream. We took advantage of competitive weaknesses in Central and Eastern Europe. I think Romania is one of the examples that local competing carrier went down. We kind of took over, and we opened up an airline in Abu Dhabi. And now we are really very focused on reinstating all the efficiencies of the business model and just to deliver what we are good at and deliver more of it.
If we had talked about a couple of months back, we would have, the most pressing factors seem to be the Ukraine war, the economy with inflation and the fuel yo-yo and the possible economic downturn on shortages of labors and planes. How was that an issue for the industry and your company as well? It seemed to be not a real issue and compared to other companies.
Well, I mean, the way I would put this is that, so if I look at the last 3 years, first 2 years, COVID, last year of war, we dealt with the COVID challenges pretty well because we knew it would be over at one point. We knew that as we were investing at one point, we will start taking the returns on those investments. But we found ourselves in a very different situation when the war broke out in Ukraine. We were unprepared for that, so we had a hard time to kind of maneuver ourselves through the last year. Now, obviously, we learned a lot. We learned that we need to be more resilient. We learned that we need to be hedged on fuel, and we should not be exposing ourselves, even if it's a bad economic kind of decision. And we have changed a lot during the course of the last year. And now we are seeing all those changes coming around and delivering the results. So we actually took the last year for transitioning our business model to become more resilient. If something like a war happens again or a COVID happens again, that we can deal with the situation a lot better. We have been very focused on liquidity. I mean, we are one of the very few airlines in the world that has not taken any government support. So we managed ourselves from the market, and we are still very strong on liquidity. As we speak, we are sitting on 1.5 billion euros of cash. And I find it incredibly important that liquidity needs to be measured in the airline industry, because really what you learned during the COVID times is that 2 weeks into the COVID period, all the airlines were running to the governments begging for money. And you can certainly blame the governments how they played the game, that they cherry-picked their favorite airlines and they supported them, but they didn't really roll out a fair and equitable platform with that regard. So hopefully there are learnings not only for the players like ourselves, but also there are learnings for other constituents like governments here.
But what about inflation? How will that change the industry? And
well, I mean, I think inflation is an issue of twofold. One is people are not prepared to pay for inflation unless they have to. People, if you look at flying, people want to fly cheap, they want to fly safe, and they want to spend money wherever they go. Especially short and medium haul travel has become totally commoditized over the last period. And when there is an issue, I think the industry is forced to look at efficiency measures to offset some of the inflationary moments. So I think that's clearly one issue we need to deal with. Second issue is that simply because this is a commodity lowest cost wins in commodities, and I think that's the underlying factor for the success of Wizz Air, we have to do better than our competitors. So it's like you are in a jungle wandering with some other people and you bump into a bear. You don't have to run faster than the bear, you just have to run faster than the other guy next to you. And I think this is what we are really focused on. We want to run faster than the other guy next to us to take advantage of the situation, to be more competitive, and do better than the rest of the industry. But yes, inflation is hitting us. We are not immune from inflation, but we try to offset it with efficiency measures. So for example, we are converting our fleet from a 180-seater A320 to a 239-seater A321. I mean, that brings in a lot of efficiencies and a lot of offsetting against inflation. And we try to do it better than our competitors.
Do you see any impact on from the economy, that it's going down with the banking crisis or things like that? Do you see that in your bookings or in an outlook for the rest of the year?
I think in the last year, I'm hearing it from everyone that you must be in a bad business because demand is softening and people won't fly. I remember that when it was the COVID breakout, some very smart people said that will change aviation completely. Consumers are no longer the same. I don't think anything has changed. I think everything is the same. Who remembers COVID anymore? I was in China, and China was really holding up COVID measures. I was there 2 weeks ago, and you are in Beijing, the capital, and like COVID would have never happened. No mask, no talks, nothing. Actually, it is prohibited to talk about COVID. So I think life moves on. There is no shorter thing than people's memory. So people just go on with life. And I think aviation remains in the forefront of mobility. People are very keen to spend money on travel. They want to fulfill themselves. And to be honest, looking at the market going into summer, we are seeing a very robust demand. Despite the fact that we are growing 70%, I think our constraint is not demand. We could do more than that. Our constraint is our own capacity to be able to deliver the growth in terms of getting planes, getting people. If you just look at the organizational side of Wizz Air, 2 years ago we had 4,200 people employed by the company. Today we have over 8,000 people. So over 2 years we doubled the size of the company. We have to hire those people. We need to train those people. We need to induct those people. So it is really that side of the equation that is containing as opposed to demand. I think demand is very robust. People want to go. People are prepared to spend. So I'm very positive.
We had many boom phases in aviation before, but there was always a self-inflicted wound called overcapacity, meaning that the industry builds up capacity more, that there will be more planes delivered. And how do you see this coming? I mean, I read a statistic that there are 100 more airlines operational in the world than there were at the low point of COVID. Will that happen again, or do you see some discipline or some sense in the industry?
I mean, to be honest, I think the term overcapacity is the term of the losers. Yes, I mean, if you are losing in the market and you have no idea what to do with the consumers, you use the term overcapacity. It's overcapacity of yours. I don't think that we have ever delivered overcapacity to the market. People just simply don't want to be ripped off. They are not prepared to pay the fares of Lufthansa, British Airways, Air France, when there are alternatives available to them on the same routes, flying the same aircraft, even probably better aircraft than what those guys are flying for a fraction of the price what those legacy carriers are charging. So yes, for the legacy carriers it's overcapacity, but it's their overcapacity, it's not overcapacity of the industry.
Do you see your market share growing from, say, the full-service carriers, if you want to call them that? Is that a process that's already happening in your markets, or are you exploring new markets? What is that?
I mean, we are gaining market shares everywhere. I mean, if I look at just Central and Eastern Europe as a whole, pre-COVID, we had 18% market share. Today, we have 26% market share. I don't think there is such thing as full-service carriers in Europe. There are high-charging carriers and low-charging carriers. So
I mean, what's better taking a Lufthansa seat versus a Wizz Air seat? Older aircraft, you are squeezed probably even more than on our seats. So I think that kind of a distinction has gone away. So there are efficient businesses and there are inefficient businesses. Efficient businesses are charging low, inefficient businesses are charging high. I think that's the only difference. It's not the service. I'm getting nothing. So I was flying a full service carrier, you would say, yesterday, and I was given nothing on board. So not even a glass of water, nothing. So if you wanted to have something, you had to pay for it. So what's the full service in this?
Well, then it was Lufthansa, at least they offer a bottle of water. What about the side effects of growth? We hear about slot limits, we hear about sustainability, regulations. How will that impact your business model or the industry as a whole?
I think sustainability is not a question. Sustainability is something what the industry has to face and has to deliver on. We cannot hold the industry hostage of being guilty for not protecting sufficiently the environment. Wizz Air has taken the position of being in the forefront of all initiatives related to sustainability. But first of all, we are already the greenest airline in Europe, probably in the world, given the technology what we are flying and given the efficiency of the business model. We were just running some numbers. If every route was operated with a Wizz Air aircraft today in Europe, the carbon footprint of the industry would come down by 35% overnight. So that's where we are versus the rest of the industry. But going beyond, I think the ultimate solution is going to be a decarbonized technology coming into the propulsion system, probably hydrogen. And in between, I think we need to bridge, and sustainable aviation fuel might be the bridging mechanism. But the problem with SAF is that it is incredibly uneconomical at this point in time. It just doesn't make any economic sense to apply. So I think governments will also have to play into this to see how they can support initiatives, technological innovation with that regard, to make sure that actually there is an economic rationale for using alternative fuel versus the current fuel. But we ourselves made actually private equity type of investments into SAF productions. We are entering into all sorts of commercial contracts with future SAF providers. So we are leading the pack here. But I think that the issue goes beyond the industry itself. I think it will require some government regulations, some government interactions too.
What kind of regulations would you recommend? And will you not be bitten by these regulations because they might start comparing your output to a baseline in 2019, and where a high-growth airline like yours might be bitten harder? So what is an appropriate regulation that will not harm the faster-growing airlines?
Well, I mean, again, I think the current regulatory thinking, unfortunately, is highly affected by the inefficient overcharging, dragging legacy carriers in the industry, because their interest is to show sustainability as a corporate matter. Sustainability is not a corporate matter. Sustainability is an efficiency measure, and I think it needs to be looked at from the perspective of the consumer. So when I'm a consumer and I can choose between flights, I can fly someone like a Wizz Air with roughly 45 grams of per carbon footprint, or I can fly, I don't know, like a Lufthansa with 100 grams. And it has nothing to do with how much Lufthansa is growing or shrinking, or Wizz Air is growing on the marketplace. There is no outright position for any businesses that suggests that just because you were an airline 10 years ago, you must be an airline in 10 years from now too. I mean, unless you are able to adapt, you have no place in the world. And I think the airline industry has to evolve, and efficient carriers, sustainable carriers, will be replacing capacity of the dragging, inefficient, not changing, not adapting legacy carriers. So I think this whole thinking around regulation, that we look at the high-growth airlines and high-growth airlines are penalized because of their growth, that's completely wrong. I think that's an intellectual defeat, because you need to, let me just finish, you need to look at it really from the perspective of the consumer. And I think politics, regulations must serve the consumer, and the industry must also serve the consumer.
But do you see this happening? Isn't it the other way around, that the growth airlines are punished because growth is considered dangerous for the environment and not, you know, the average output of 45 grams per 100 passenger kilometers?
Oh, look, I mean, as I said, Europe would reduce carbon footprint by 35% should Europe be flown by Wizz Air.
But that's not happening.
What it means is that we don't need Lufthansa, we don't need British Airways, guys, we don't need Air France. You need more Wizz Air, you need more Ryanair, you need more EasyJet. That's what it says.
But you know, that's a pipe dream. It's not going to happen because
why not?
Look at the COVID experience. You know, the flag carriers would always be protected because of the connectivity on long-haul routes, and so they will have, you know, the protection on the short-haul business as well. So will that ever? I mean, of course you will have to say that, but is that really going to happen? And will you do something? Because even in I4A, they will always have a different approach than the one you just alluded to.
Well, that's why we are not in A4E. Well, I mean, I think you need to look at the trends. If you look at the trends, European short-haul travel is already served by roughly 50% by low-cost carriers, and that market share will continue to rise. I think the industry keeps converting from legacies into low-cost carriers. I'm talking about short-haul travel. And I think there are different challenges coming up in the future than the one what we are talking about. So basically what you are saying is that no matter what, Lufthansa has a preeminent right to exist forever in mankindhood. I disagree with this. I think there are lots of businesses that become relevant at one stage of history and irrelevant in other stages. There was a book written in 1972, and the book was titled Built to Last. So that was, at that time in 1972, America's 30th largest companies. And the author believed that those companies were created to stay in business leadership, in existence forever. And guess how many of those companies are still around?
4?
Yes, 4. So why do you say that, and this is the time span of 50 years, why do you say that certain airlines must be around forever? There is no right for everyone, guys. I mean, your right is going to be measured by the consumers. Either you are relevant to the market, what consumers want, or you are irrelevant to the market, and then you're going to be dropped by the consumers. And what does the consumer want? The consumer wants to fly cheap. The consumer wants to fly green. That's what the consumer wants. That's what we need to deliver. If you are able to deliver, be it Lufthansa, British Airways, great. Transition yourself. If you are not able to deliver it, that someone else like Wizz Air will take over.
Do you have any allies for that? And have a political process in Brussels or elsewhere that's going on? Or is it just you talking on the stage in Cluj?
No, I'm not talking to stage. And I hope you recognize the chart which was put up by David, that Wizz Air is 50% of Romania. Where is Lufthansa? 5%.
Yeah, but still, I mean, how do you work this process? Do you seek allies? Do you push for it? Or do you just build on sense, which is in Brussels probably not the smartest way?
No, I mean, I think we are, of course, vocal and talking to Brussels, we are talking to the regulators, we are talking to the governments, and I think increasingly it is recognized who creates value for society, who creates value for economies. I mean, Cluj is a good example. First time I was here, 2006, 2007, I mean, Cluj was not even on the radar of aviation. It was an airport of 200,000 passengers. Today it's 3 million, and we are 65% of that. It was us who created that economic development. It was us who made the investments. It was us who created connectivity for the consumers. It was not Lufthansa. It was not some of those other guys. And I think that economic value is becoming precious increasingly and usually recognized by governments and constituents. You know, we create connectivity for the consumer. We create employment. I mean, we have 8,000 employees ourselves. But I bet you that probably there are another 20,000 jobs created because of our activities. We are boosting tourism. Tourists will not fly expensive airlines because they don't want to spend their money on flight tickets. They want to spend their money on wherever they are, and whatever they want to do in that destination. And we create a different value proposition to that political aim than many of the other airlines. I think that's the rationale.
One of the changes in the network was you stopped Chisinau on a very short notice and rerouted into northern Romania, which is a 3-hour drive. What was the reason for that?
Well, I guess we all know that there is a war happening fairly close by, and there are explosions, and we have 3 aircraft still in Kiev, and we are trying to get them out, but we haven't been able to do that over the last year. And Moldova got closed airspace-wise twice in that period, and we concluded that it's just risky at this point in time, and we are not prepared to lose airplanes any longer. So we took basically a precautionary measure based on the security situation in the neighborhood, but we remain totally committed to Moldova, and whenever we see the situation settling down, we will be back in the market. But unfortunately, we just took note of the situation.
So are the carriers that are still there taking a risk? The Turkish, the LH group, or not? What do they not see the risk, or why do you think they act differently? There are still a couple of other carriers who still serve the country. Are they taking an unnecessary risk? Is that a conclusion that you would make?
Well, why do I have to make the same conclusion on the situation as other carriers? So I think everyone does what they think is the best for their business. This was our conclusion. We might be right, we might be wrong, but that's what we decided on.
If I may interrupt, there are 3 questions now. We can take them from the floor if you wish, or...
Let's take
Okay.
one.
Okay. There are 2 questions from Mr. Christian Paris. Since Cluj Airport is aiming to build a longer runway, when Wizz Air will fly long haul? That's the first question.
Well, bad news. Wizz Air is not going to fly long haul, but Wizz Air is going to start receiving A321 XLR aircraft, and that aircraft is capable of flying up to roughly 8 hours. So I think that gives a different range and different layer of opportunities for network development in the future. Those aircraft still have to be delivered, and at the moment the delivery program is somewhat delayed. But we're going to be having 70 of those aircraft. So I think that will create a lot of opportunities for major markets, including Cluj at that point. But this is a few years down the line. But if your explicit question is whether we would be flying from Cluj to the United States of America, the answer is no, it's not going to be Wizz Air.
Okay, thank you. Second question, when will be the next offer to buy EasyJet?
Well, I mean, I think we don't comment on matters like that, but maybe a kind of a genuine approach. So please have a look at the profile of Wizz Air and how we are delivering growth of the business. So at a size where we are today, roughly we are able to deliver around 15 million incremental passengers a year. If I look at the next 3 to 4 years, that's kind of the number. Now, you can relate it to various airlines. I mean, that would be bigger than Tarom. That would be kind of the size of Polish Airlines. And then you ask a question, so why the hell would we ever drag ourselves into an acquisition of an airline with all the headaches, all the complexities, all the issues, if actually I can deliver that organically with no hassle, easy to execute, based on the business model, what I know, what I have delivered day in, day out for a long time. So acquisition, M&A, doesn't really come intuitively to Wizz Air. I know that there was speculation on EasyJet, and it's kind of topical and exciting, but I don't want to make any further comments on that. But I don't think that Wizz Air is designed to be a consolidating company on the basis of M&As. With that regard, there are other companies that do a lot better job than what we could do. So IAG, I think it's a good consolidating company. Lufthansa is a good consolidating company with that regard, but we are not one of them.
Thank you. And the last question. You start Yasi Istanbul and Budapest Istanbul. Do you have plans to fly more cities in Turkey and other Middle East countries from Romania or Budapest?
Yes, we would love to, but Turkey is a difficult country. So Turkey keeps acting on the basis of bilateral agreements between Turkey and respective countries. We tend to be European, and we try to kind of take advantage of the European open sky platform, but that doesn't necessarily work all the times with Turkey. So time to time we are lucky, and with regard to Budapest, etc., we were kind of lucky and we were able to manage the process, but it requires quite some coordination and quite some support from the European Union too, to make sure that Turkey adopts more and more kind of the European way of looking at traffic lights and designations.
Thank you. A big applause for the very interesting discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do you have one more question, or?
Actually, a couple of.
Okay,
maybe,
one more question then.
Maybe, what about Western Europe as, you know, developing, especially major bases? I saw you chatting to Joost very intimately, so will we see you more in the bigger airports or more in Western Europe, or is it not the case anytime soon?
That friendship is more Budapest related than Munich related, I would say. He was a reasonable guy when he was managing Budapest in terms of cost. Now he is totally overcharging Munich, so we are not interested. Yeah, I mean, I think on Western Europe we took a position that we have an interest in select markets. London is one of them. London has been a long-term strategic operating platform for Wizz Air, and with the creation of Wizz Air UK as a contingency for Brexit at that time, created the operating opportunity for extending that position through entering Gatwick. So London remains important, and we're going to be looking for growth opportunities. But it is a slot-constrained market. It's a real estate game. Italy, we used to be looking at a serious entry into Italy for a long time, but conditions were not right. COVID created the conditions, so we entered Italy, and we are a fairly big airline now in Italy, and we continue to grow, so you should expect us to grow. Austria, we believe that Austria is pretty much a halo effect from Central and Eastern Europe, and we are trying to capitalize on that halo effect by establishing ourselves there. But I would like to say that we have full-fledged Western European ambitions. We don't. I think we have selective views. We are interested in select market opportunities that work strategically, that work operationally, and that work economically too. But we are not trying to invade Western Europe, so I don't think you should be expecting that. If you look at our business, really we are setting ourselves up against key kind of geographical footprints. So our most important geographical focus remains Central and Eastern Europe. This is home run for the airline, and we will keep pushing the lines. We will keep investing in Central and Eastern Europe. I was talking about kind of the western side of the equation, and we are of course very excited about the eastern side of the equation, and we classify that strategy as Go East. We have the Abu Dhabi airline. We started flying to Saudi Arabia. We are flying more and more as destination markets to the STAN countries in Central Asia, and we find those markets incredibly exciting and interesting, totally underdeveloped from a low-cost flying perspective, and we are seeing some very strong consumer demand for our business model there.
For 500 planes? You plan to grow to 500 planes. Is this market enough for 500 planes in like 10 years?
Well, that's what I think. So if you look at those 500 planes, we think half of them, 250, will be flying in Central and Eastern Europe, and the other 250 will be split between West and East. And we are actually very positive. And again, I don't think that even today the issue is the market. We have more market opportunities than capacity. The issue is our ability to ramp up operations, organization, fleet, etc. But I think 500 airplane is very realistic, and I think we're going to get there in 2030.
Thank you. One more question.
Thank you very much.
One more question from the audience.
Okay.
Don't you think fast expansion comes on expense of safety and pilot quality?
Safety and?
Don't you think fast expansion comes on expense of safety and pilot quality? And this is the last question, so thank you.
No, I don't think that we would ever jeopardize any standards on safety. I mean, Wizz Air is considered to be one of the safest airlines in the world. We've never had a serious incident, and we are extremely safety focused as a business. I mean, let's not forget that we fly the youngest fleet of aircraft, so we are already investing on the technological front into safety, that we bring the very latest technology into the fleet. And we have a very strong safety culture in the company, voluntary reporting, all those sort of matters. And we have a very strong safety record. I would also say that we are the only serious airline in Europe regulated from a safety perspective by EASA, the European Safety Agency. And EASA has the highest safety standards you can imagine. And I think we are benefiting from those standards as an airline operator, that we are not measured against, I think, lower national standards, but we are measured up against the highest standards in the industry. So the answer is absolutely no.
Thank you very much. A warm applause. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And now it's time for our first roundtable talk. Mr. Andrew Charlton, Managing Director, Aviation Advocacy. And I would also like to call on stage in alphabetical order Mr. Anka Pahidean, Area Manager, Eastern Europe IATA. Mr. Joost Lammers, CEO, Munich Airport. Mr. Marian Jean Marinescu, MEP, European Parliament. And Mr. Klaus Peter Wils, Chairman of German Federal Parliament's Aerospace Group. So, gentlemen, and thank you. Thank you.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's still morning, I think. Yes, good morning. Wherever you like. Sit wherever you like. We need one more chair. This is the session. This is the one and only session where we're going to talk about regulation. And that's much less boring than you think it is. It sounds awful to say we're going to talk about regulation and go, oh, here we go. But we're not, because this is actually literally where the rubber meets the road. Wow. Wow. So our panellists have already been introduced, but let me see if I can put them in a slightly different way. We have, at the far end of the table, someone who represents airports, although I'm led to believe after the last presentation he's quite a high-cost airport, although I don't believe that, actually. In the middle of the group, the rows between several thorns, we have someone who represents the airlines, but between those two we have regulators. We have a member of the German Parliament and also the President, am I right, the Chairman of the German Federal Parliament's Aerospace Group, and of course aerospace is terribly important in Germany. And importantly as well, we have Mr. Marian Jean Marinescu, who is an MEP. He's a Romanian MEP, but it's fair to say that he has been at the absolute forefront of regulation and regulatory change in Europe for a very long time. And as Olivia said earlier on, about 90% of the rules that we make, or the rules that we have to live with in Europe, come from Brussels, come from Europe itself. So we need to absolutely understand what's going on in Brussels if we want to do our job well. But let me start, if I may, by asking you, Anka, you've got two regulators here. What regulatory changes do you think we need? Are you happy with the way all the regulations are at the moment, or do we need change?
Thank you for the question, Andrew. I think it's more a need for refining.
A need for what, sorry?
Refining and get to real regulation. But let me start by something very positive. I mean, we all know that the recovery from pandemic is nearly done, and we are optimistic about the future.
Put the mic near your mouth.
Huh? And we are optimistic about the future. And since sustainability was mentioned here many times, it's clearly that we have to need to do something about it and really take charge in this license to grow. But we are not alone in this, and clearly in this topic especially, we expect greater help from the regulators. And when I say help, is help, not taxing, not over-regulating. I mean help like incentivize, like sharing best practices, like establishing frameworks for taking further the climate change fight. You know, the airlines have taken first step in signing that net zero pledge, meaning by the 2050, the flying will be net zero. It was followed by the ICAO last year with the long-term aspirational goal, and then the states follow and they sign and they committed as well to the net zero. Okay, we are all committed. How we are going to get there? 2050 is around the corner.
It is indeed. And can I bring you back to the regulation question? I've always loved to hear IATA's views on stuff, but what regulation do we need to become sustainable by 2050?
I would say from the SAF perspective, because this is...
Sorry, SAF, you said.
Sustainable Aviation Fuel.
Yeah, I know SAF. It's SAF. I just couldn't hear you.
From the SAF perspective, we would need incentivize rather than taxation above. Incentivizing producers, gather the industry, gather the oil the refineries, ensuring the infrastructure, and yes.
So you think, let me make sure I've got this right. You think airlines shouldn't be taxed, but in fact they should be given a lot of money to solve the SAF conundrum?
Well, actually this SAF, I was not thinking about giving money to the airlines, more incentivizing the producers.
Okay, incentivizing the producers for the benefit of the airlines.
For the benefit of, because you know SAF.
But where's this magic money going to come from if you don't have tax?
The tax is now on carbon emissions.
Different point. let me bring you in as the airport guy. Same question. What regulations do you think we need? What regulations do we not need? And do you think the SAF suppliers should be given lots more money?
Yeah, thanks again. First of all, morning Andrew and everyone. And I think at the end of the day, you always need a regulation that works, right? I mean, and works means something that works under competitive environment conditions, it works under sustainable conditions. So I think as we're seeing regulation shaping there in Brussels, I think there are still a lot of things to change, to develop further. And talking specifically about my airport, Munich, and I think also other major transfer and intercontinental, international hubs, you know, we are very much concerned about a regulation that is only putting all the pressure and burdens on European carriers and European airports, but not thinking about the non-European part of the world. And I think that's our biggest challenge these days, to get it really under conditions that guarantee that non-carbon leakage will happen. You know, climate is global. I think we all want transformation. We all want to have decarbonization. I think it's not if we want it, but how and when and under which conditions. And again, I think it's a lot about, of course, of money and burdens on the industry, on the sector. But again, we need to make sure that this is not destroying the competitiveness. And I think that's my biggest concern at this point. And I think what we need then, of course, is also public money, public funding, also to come back into the system directly, indirectly, to airports, airlines, to also allow, for instance, to buy sustainable aviation fuels. And we all know it in the beginning, and they are much, much more expensive than conventional classical fuels. So I think there's this part of the regulation that I'm still missing. I think the target is good, decarbonization, the targets, but really to have market-driven and market-working instruments that, again, will not destroy our industry and give us a big disadvantage in the world of aviation. Because, again, it's a global industry and does not stop at EU borderlines. That's what really concerns me very much.
Yeah, it is a troubling topic, isn't it? That Europe seems to be right at the front in all of this, but yet this is a global industry. I've got two views on that, but let me ask you first, if I may, Marion. Do you think that solving the SAFs issue is a Brussels problem? Is that something Brussels should be doing, or is it something each member state should be doing? No, for Marion. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. So, in my opinion, we don't need any more regulations at all, because Europe filled 2 rooms of papers. Americans gave money for research. So IRA, it's the best example to follow, and I think that we are a lot behind what you said, that Europe should be a model. This is Timmermans' idea, and I don't follow this idea. I think it's a very bad idea, because he said that the others will follow. I don't think that China or US will follow us. So I think that we need, you know, the first result of this meeting for me is that I hope, because the deadline is very soon, I shall table a pilot project to ask an impact assessment of all files for 55 files for aviation, and to try to define a strategy to implement this package of laws, because I saw some pieces here. Mr. Jankovec said something. I am organizing also in Sky and Space Intergroup some debates about this, but we need this impact assessment, because this period is not the best period for aviation. There are a lot of pieces of legislation that are already out, and with different problems, starting with ETS, phase out of free allowances, then ICAO, then SAFs that I hope next week will be approved. Then AFIR with all the conditions, taxonomy that is not yet finalized and is good for the moment as what leaked, but DigiClima has a lot of objection, and also Net Zero Act that is not mentioning alternative fuels as one of the main way to decarbonize. It's not on the list. It's only hydrogen, solar, wind, and the other thing. So we need to push first to put it there, and then we need money for research and development, for SAFs, for technologies, that means the cheaper technologies, so to decrease the price, and we need money why not to take the model of the Americans to give, as it was said already, incentives to the producers. Now the fight is to put targets, 2%, 3%, e-fuels, 2030, 6%, and so on, and sub-targets to have e-fuels, which is very bad. For you will be very bad, because a target, 3% of fuels, means that you have the industry, you have to burn this, which means the price will go up, because you are obliged to do it. So there are a lot of things, and are others that are coming. Passengers, rides, slots, charges for airports will come. I don't know if we can finish this till April, but there are others to come. So I think that aviation industry should think to a strategy to implement all this. We shall not, we cannot forget about decarbonization, that's very clear. But the only way to do it in aviation is SAF, yeah? And then we hope that the manufacturers will bring something electric for small planes and short distances, I don't know, 2030, and maybe Airbus hydrogen in 2035, but it's very difficult. But you need to react. The industry must react, otherwise the European Commission and I'm sorry to say this, but the Facebook majority from Parliament will go for targets. And don't forget that next year it's a year of elections. So everybody in the Parliament will think that they need another seat. So they will do something for Facebook, not for the reality on the industry, on the field. So this is the reality. So you have to react through all ways to come to combat the digiclima. Yeah? To say we want to decarbonize, but we need a real path, a real way.
I think there's an interesting point there about how we have given the message so far. We've done, I think, as an industry, a terrible job of selling the message that we've actually made a lot of progress. And I think there's some calls for reassessing what it is that we say. But Klaus-Peter, let me turn to you. What the hell is going on in Berlin with all these car things? Isn't the entire German industry's push for continuing to have sustainable fuels going to make sustainable demand up and therefore for even more expensive? What the hell is going on in Germany?
Well, I'm not the right person to ask me because...
Well, you're as close as I've got. So.
Yes.
Germany, wake up. Sorry,
I didn't elect them. Anyway, I think you're completely right. The storytelling of industry, of flight industry has to become much more better. We have to talk about the freedom of movement. We have to talk about cultural exchange. We have to talk about challenges and also chances that derive from coming together, bringing people together, and all that. We were just in Germany. We have those ideologists who say flying is bad, don't do that, go by train or by bicycle or whatsoever. Much fun for the way to Cluj by bicycle. But anyway, they are not ready to take reality as it is, and we will only be able to earn the money as state when we have a economy that is running, when we have growth. They tell us we have to have degrowth in order to save the planet. What a rubbish! That won't work, because if we don't generate the funds to do those things we need to be done, we think they have to be done. We won't match the future challenges. I think regulation has the job to show an aim, but not to track the path. We have to be open for new technologies. We cannot reduce the carbon production by industrial processes. So we have maybe carbon storage, carbon usage, or whatsoever. The future is quite open. We have really bright engineers. We have bright scientists. They have to solve those problems. We just tell them if the effects, if the outcome of your economic activity does harm to someone, and you don't have to pay for it, we will make you pay for it. This is internalization of external costs.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But to come back on that matter, to come back to the question about what's happening in the German Parliament with motor cars and the internal combustion engine and the determination to keep internal combustion engines on the grounds that we can have e-fuel, my fear is that makes SAFs even more expensive because there'll be more demand for SAFs.
You're completely right. This is a wrong decision to say goodbye to the car. This is our strength. We built the cars for the whole world. Mercedes, BMW, everywhere on the world you find those cars.
But can't you build electric cars going forward? I mean, Mercedes must have the capacity to build electric cars.
They do, but they're kind of behind the Chinese manufacturers or others. So it's not our duty as German politics to go to those points where we perform very good, to bring it to an end. This should be an agenda of another country, not of the German government.
It's an interesting debate, though,
The problem is, indeed, we will have a competition for those SAFs which are only in small amounts deliverable in the first years, and we shouldn't just take it to drive cars. We should. We need it for flying.
But that's the conflict, isn't it? I mean, the German car manufacturers are saying, no, we need it to drive, but yet we're saying we need it to fly, and there isn't all that much of it. And of course, it's very hard to make without stealing food stock and those sorts of things. Although apparently, did you know this? There is an algae that's got an amazingly high energy intensity, and we would only need an area the size of Belgium to fuel all of aviation. I think that would be a really good use for Belgium, as a matter of fact. So, Marion, what's your view on this? Should the car industry stand back, or should we continue to build? Yes, please, yeah. I'm sorry, I've never previously used your name, Marion.
I think that your question, what is going on in Germany, is Germany wake up. Because we insisted a lot, we voted against the termination of the combustion engine, because this will put in danger the target of 55% reduction in 2030. Because in order to decrease emissions, you need to decrease emissions of the hundreds of millions of cars that are on the road right now, and will be another 20 years. For this, you need alternative fuels. That's very clear. It's the only way to do it. To make alternative fuels, you need a market. If you kill the engine in 2035, who will invest in alternative fuels? In my opinion, it's a big mistake. We voted in the parliament, me and many other colleagues, the difference was not so large, against the agreement. So now, Germany wake up. They had a recital, not in the body of the text of the law, but in the recital, something regarding e-fuels. Now they are asking an assurance that e-fuels will be allowed, so engine will be allowed. Yes, for me was a big question. So member states agreed to kill the engine, which means around 250,000 jobs less. This is the calculation. But in the same time, the same member states, they don't agree with single sky, which is no cost, no job loss, nothing. I am looking, Mr. Varadi left. Hungary is one of the countries which is against, and I cannot go through with the file in the parliament. So there are two different views. You kill the engine, combustion engine, but in the same time, you don't want CES2+ that could decrease emissions without cost very quickly between, I don't know, 5 and 10%. So this is an example also. So I hope that they will succeed. And I am very happy that Romania is also in this thing. And don't forget, these guys, those member states, are speaking also about Euro 7, which is another story. So about CO2 for trucks, another story. So now we want Euro 7 to invest and in 2035 to kill the engine. Sorry, but this is totally ridiculous. I don't understand. A file that can be put in implementation somewhere in 29. So what? To put Euro 7 to invest in R&D and so on for 5 years? I don't think that it's efficient.
Munich, of course, has an enormous motor car industry, so I'm assuming that you support what's going on in Germany?
Well, I'm not really representing the German car manufacturers.
I didn't say you were.
No, but seriously, I think there's quite some points I would like to maybe reinforce. I think what I like very much was what Marian was saying, really to look at what's really the impact of all this regulation coming out of Brussels and looking, for instance, at our industry a little bit in aviation. I need to seriously say what we have seen over the past few years, what kind of files and, bureaucracy is producing files. That's what they're for. So I think it took us, and I think really ACI Europe did a great job many issues where we say, is this really needed? No, it's really not needed. For instance, we had a lot of discussions and also regulation about airport charges. You were just mentioning this one. And I think, of course, this is a traditional, I think, area of conflict between an airline and an airport. But I think we see everywhere, Joe mentioned the example, how they started here in Cluj, in Romania. So I would say the market regulating this very nicely. We have a working and great, let's say, a regulation there, and no need to develop and to tighten this. And still it took really a lot of years really to come through with this message also in Brussels and towards the bureaucracy. I think in that context really also maybe just to name and to appreciate really the strong support we had from the Romanian Commissioner, Ms. Valean, on this issue specifically. But still it shows, just as one example, how much effort it takes and how many, let's say, unnecessary filing and creation of regulation is happening there, right? Another one besides, for instance, charges, what I believe is also something that is absolutely not needed, to have more competition on ground handling. I think since 1996 we know we have a regulation that opened the market, and I think that was done, and that was good. It has some, I think, even downsides, rather the other way around. We need now really to evaluate this and to see what happens to quality, what happens to labor conditions. I think this was a regulation driven too far. You know, we see if the quality is not there and the prices are not on a reasonable level, you don't get the service you need to make really a safe and proper good job, for instance, in ground handling. So I want to say, I take many of these examples where I can also see there's so much regulation and things they are not consistent. They don't really fit, and they're rather blocking the right energy and the right funding.
But isn't it, I mean, I agree with everything you just said, I think. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if you're a regulator, your job is to regulate. You can't get paid if you're not regulating, if you're a regulator. So, but how do we get the sensible balance between sensible regulations, and I like the way you put it, Klaus-Peter, that all the regulation should do is provide a goal, or sort of an end state, if you like. How do we get that balance? I mean, is that a job for IATA, do you think, Anke, in the short term? I mean, how do we, obviously open for everyone, but yeah.
For IATA, we can certainly advocate for the needs of the airlines and of the industry as a whole.
But also to advocate for the regulators to stand back a bit, is that?
I'll go, you know, one of our most successful projects was electronic ticketing.
Oh, yes.
And it was both a combination of carrot and stick. And I think that this is what we should do now in terms of, you know, investment in self-production, in new technologies, research development. This is the carrot part. We are now more focusing on the stick, on taxing, on introducing over-taxation. For instance, we have Corsia already. It's there, it's approved, endorsed, started to work. Why do we have ETS? It's the same. I mean, it's international, is already taxed. Why do you want to have, you know, the super cherry on the cake? Only because you're Europe and you want to be at the forefront?
Yeah.
No.
Well, there's that. Yeah. So Marion, Klaus-Peter, are you carrot men or stick men?
I think that the best example will be to take the text that we voted in Committee Transport Committee. I am member in Transport Committee. I am coordinator for EPP Group. So you will see a huge difference between the text that we voted in Tran, but unfortunately we have only opinion because the main committee was ENVI. And the text and the final text then in the plenary was that from ENVI. So you will see in the Tran text a balanced approach, a friendly text with the industry, with the same target, so keeping the target in 55, but going there in another way. For example, establishing a fund for aviation for SAF from allowances, establishing the fund for maritime also to develop new technologies, book and claim, another system that you need it because you cannot provide alternative fuels in all airports. That is in danger. I don't think that it will be approved. So I gave you some examples. So if you take, so we could do it in a balanced way. This I advocate it all the time. We need a balanced approach. to keep in between a very sensitive thing, decarbonization, CO2, climate, temperature, and so on, but also competitiveness, because sorry, but I said also in my group, I don't see any difference between dying because emissions and dying because you are hungry. You don't have something to eat because you don't have a job. So we need a balance between decarbonization and competitiveness. And in Tran text, you will find it.
So a classic politician's answer, you're both a carrot man and a stick man. You just want a balance.
Yeah, but I don't think that you can. In life, you live only with chocolate. I don't think you take also something.
I come from Switzerland. Of course, I live only with chocolate. It's a national obligation.
Let me give the ball indeed back to you, back to the industry. We have to really think about communication and storytelling. If you look, we have very powerful and effective in terms of having media performance NGOs around in all that field.
No doubt.
In Germany, it's worst. And we have those idiots gluing to the roads in order to block everything. It's crazy. They should go for and learn physics and engineer sciences and all that to make the world better, but not block other people. So whatsoever. But they are everywhere in the media. They are influencing policy very heavily. And well, nobody is against that. You are telling the old stories as industry. Yeah, this is a good message. We enable growth. We enable wealthiness. This is all about coming together and having international exchange. So why don't we tell this and stop advertising in media that are fighting against aviation, for example? Really go tough way. It's not in the sleeping wagon where we can win this war.
That reference there to trains, I presume, overnight trains instead of flights. We've only 90 seconds left, and I think we could have talked for another 90 minutes, to be frank. We've only 90 seconds left. I want to change subject slightly. You mentioned slots, you mentioned ground handling, you mentioned a bunch of other regulations. But my fundamental question, start with you, come around. Did we let the pandemic go to waste? Did we build back better after the pandemic?
No, I don't see. No. Don't really see. I see even more challenges now. I mean, just seeing the acceleration of finding staff, of finding labor everywhere in the markets. I think the shortage, demographics is there, inflation is there. I mean, we build back. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's somewhere back to normal, but it's more demanding. You know, the new normal is more demanding. So not much better. No, can't say that.
I agree.
No.
So, Marion, did we let the pandemic go to waste?
No, I don't think so. We have still to work to I don't know, to forget about the pandemic. I fly each week. All flights are delayed. If we're speaking about aviation, and we are speaking about other, all the other areas, we still have a lot of things. But keep in mind that after pandemic came energy crisis, prices, and after the bloody war in Ukraine. So there are not. This is not only pandemic. It's a lot of other things. You said something about taking food from the mouth. Yes, this is in my opinion, a communist propaganda done by Transport and Environment NGO. Yeah, which if you look, you dig some on internet. For the money that are financed, you will see European Commission,
yes,
but also American NGOs with very good connections with China. So think about the model when you speak about this.
I love a good conspiracy theory. Anke, did we let the pandemic go to waste?
I would say so.
So.
We've learned that we can digitalize, and we clearly digitalized most of the processes, and facilitation was better. And the way that people travel in that particular threat was still good. what we didn't learn is that we actually lost so many workers because they found out they can work somewhere else much easier, much better.
It's better to work at Amazon than to work for an airline. I think that says everything. Yeah.
And
I speak as an ex-airline employee.
It's very difficult to get them back. Yeah. So I would say we've learned, but we also lost.
Thank you. That's an excellent, well-balanced answer.
Yeah.
And Klaus-Peter?
I just say the same as Anka did. It has been a sharp setback. We recover faster than we had expected in the beginning, and all the other duties, they stay. It's not everything connected with everything. So it's still a task which is before us. Fight for open societies, fight for exchange of people, fight for exchange of goods and services and all that, what is air traffic about.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you agree that, see, we talked about regulation, but it wasn't boring. We're out of time and it's time for coffee, so please join me in thanking you, Marion, Anka and Klaus-Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, and no questions so far. Thank you. So it's time for a coffee break, a little bit of refueling now. And please, let's try to be back at 11:50 to keep with the schedule. It's not going to happen, but anyway, it's not going to happen.